The American Revolution was filled with many heroic women filling many different roles than in previous years. Abigail Adams was born November 11th, 1744, in Weymouth, Massachusetts. Abigail Adams was very influential in political ideas during the Revolution, and her letters live on today as valuable primary sources. As part of our theme in our worldview statement as historians must be dedicated to a reasoned and investigated reconstruction of primary sources. We must research and analyze Abigail Adams' letters with an unbiased viewpoint. Abigail Adams has become famous through her letters and her actions during and after the Revolutionary War. This information provided in the thousands of letters that Abigail wrote is part of the process in understanding women during this time period. Abigail never had a formal education due to sickness and other factors, but she was able to gain an education through her father's extensive library. Many of the letters Abigail wrote expressed her deep interest in many topics, including women's rights and the paradoxical society of slavery. Abigail would marry John Adams in 1764. He would have 3 sons and 2 daughters, one of which become president. Abigail Adams would start her motherhood soon after they were married, and once John Adams was called to serve in the Continental Congress in 1774, this would start the long-distance correspondence between them. These letters today serve a great valuable resource in understanding the context of some political situations, but it also gives us an insight into how Abigail is one of the first women to have some small role in American politics. John Adams would write to her about various events happening in the Revolution. When the Declaration of Independence was being drafted, Abigail wanted to remind her husband of the important issues that still stood as a new government was being created. As Bessie Erkila stated, the radicalizing effect that revolutionary rhetoric and iconography could have on women's self-conceptions and the traditional relations between male and female is particularly evident in the correspondence between Abigail and John Adams during the Revolutionary years. Abigail Adams is one of the first to note and draw out the revolutionary implications of the analogy between the political position of America and the position of female within a masculine economy. In other words, Abigail understood that the situation with women in revolutionary times could possibly change with the creation of a new government and a new system. Abigail Adams was married to a man that was in a position of power, which would mean she could possibly have some influence on some key issues. Now, I wanted to end this presentation with one of her more famous lines in one of her letters. I'm going to read an excerpt from her letter to her husband. The context is her husband is getting ready to draft the Declaration of Independence, and she's writing her husband. And she starts as, "I long to hear that you have declared an independence," she wrote John on March 31st, 1776. "And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to form a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." I find this writing quite interesting, and it relates to the atmosphere of the time of the Revolution. New governments, new doctrine, new views and perspective on social, religious, even philosophy. And so Abigail would not be able to see women's rights unfold in her time, but she would definitely be one of the first voices for women, for women's rights in her time. Thank you guys for taking your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.